What's up, internet people? You're tuned into episode 77 of the Steam Deck podcast, Flip Screen Games' weekly podcast all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse. I'm your host this week, Max Wright, joined today, as always, by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Pete and Bessie.
Wow, hello. Thank you for having me on the
Hello.
show.
You're very welcome. It's nice to have you back on. I feel like it's been me and Steve. It was me and Steve last week. I can't remember if you were around the week before because I don't know what happened the week before then. But how are you, Pete? Welcome back.
You and I have been doing a lot of shows together, like, it
Hmm.
just one-on-one, so it's yeah, they bleed together for
They
sure.
do all bleed together. Yeah, the
Yeah.
conversations we had weeks ago are conversations we're having right now, I'm sure. But yeah, we've
Time's a
got
flat circle, it doesn't matter.
it is. We've got a
Y'all
busy
made
show
it up.
today. We've got a lot to talk about today because we're going to talk about Deep Rock Galactic Survivor. We're going to talk about some questions we've been asked both on the Steam docket and on YouTube. So if you want to get your questions read out or you want to get involved in the show, hop over to YouTube, into the comments, onto our Discord. We like to answer the questions. We like to engage. But yeah, I want to start off today. I'm going to take lead of this show by talking about a game that I've been playing recently.
No, I
So
get to just sit here and let the show
sit back,
happen.
sit back, keep an eye on Twitter just in case they announce anything big that we don't want to miss it again, like we did with Nintendo
Yeah,
announcement
right?
a couple of weeks ago. Be the man in the chair.
I'm
Um,
controlling the ones and twos, I got it, everybody.
yeah. So anyone who's listened to this show or any of our shows will know that we, as a collective, me, you, and Steve, are big Vampire Survivors fans. Uh, I'm pretty sure it was in me and Steve's Game of the Year list 2022. I can't remember if it made it into yours, Pete.
I don't think it did, but I think it, like, was, like, 11 out of 10,
Yeah,
you
yeah, it
know?
was. It
Like,
was. It
I
was up there
really
for us.
enjoyed it. I don't
Hmm.
know that it made my top 10, but really great
That's a
game.
bit probably a great year, but yeah, it just had such a satisfying gameplay loop. We had spent so much time unlocking everything. It really felt like at the time where it was sort of the first year of the Steam Deck, it was the killer app of the Steam Deck. It was really addictive. It was perfect for handheld
I
play. It had a
mean,
load of content.
yeah, and you think about it, right? Like, I think, when Vampire Survivors was kinda first taking off and it was, first kinda hitting that phenomenon period, the Steam Deck was the only way you could play it mobile,
Yeah,
right? The
yeah,
mobile, version didn't exist yet, it wasn't on Steam Deck until several months later,
yeah,
and yeah, it was absolutely one of the coolest games of the moment that you could only play the way everybody wanted to play it was on
yes,
Steam
yeah.
Deck, right? Which
You
was
meant it was on Switch a few months later, not Steam Deck. But yeah, you're right. It was
sorry,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it came to Switch a few months later,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, the Steam
yeah,
Deck
and
was the place, and it was the sort of always ranked really highly on the most played Steam Deck game every month. It was
yeah,
always
top
Vampire
3.
Survivors up there. It was cheap. It was great. It was great.
Yeah,
But
that
I've
too,
been
right? Like, when it first came out, it was like $2. It's
yeah,
like,
right. And
why
I've
would you
got
not get it, right?
dozens of hours of content of gameplay out of that.
Absolutely.
But Pete, I've been playing something recently that I think might be this year's Vampire Survivors, just because it sort of feels to me like that must-have Steam Deck game that like it's the best place to play is on Steam Deck. It really feels like I'm going to spend a lot of time on this. So I actually got a copy of Deep Rock Galactic Survivors from the publisher yesterday. Shout out to Ghost Ship Games and Swipe Right for hooking us up with a code. Um, and I wasn't going to talk about it this week because I was originally going to sort of play a bunch over the weekend, talk about it in depth on next week's show once I'd had time to put sort of like 7 or 8 hours into it. And I thought today I might just touch on my first couple of hours, but I accidentally played 4 hours yesterday without meaning to.
Oh
I
my
sort of got the
gosh.
game, put it on. I was like, yeah, I'll give it a quick go. And yeah, I played 4 hours. My girlfriend was working late and my D&D session got cancelled. So I was like, all right, I'll play a bit of Tomb Raider. I'll put some washing on. I'll do some tidying, tidy up the kitchen a bit. I'll play a little bit of this, and then I sort of booted it up. And then my girlfriend came home 4 hours later, and I had done nothing. Like I was just sat there, like, oh hi, like shit, like I've just sat on my Steam Deck, like plugged in. I was like, I plugged it in, like I was like leaning closer to the plug just so I could play it. But yeah, so
And then
here's
you
my
you have that moment where it's like another human being acknowledges you, you
yeah,
recognize that time has passed and your
yeah.
shoulders are just, like, locked in. Yeah,
They've perceived me, and now I've realised that who I am and what I am. It's so
yeah.
very sobering moment,
It is.
but
It's like that moment where you're playing and the screen it doesn't happen as much anymore, I guess, but the loading it dims and you have the loading screen, you just
yeah,
see your face
see
looking
your
back at
face.
you. You're like,
Yeah.
"Oof, I should go to sleep, huh?"
Yep, which, yeah, I've definitely been having that recently.
I mean, that's
So
the sign
here
of a good game though, right? Like, that's
oh,
obviously,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, 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 yeah.
the fact that
Where you
you are having a huge play session like that go by and you're losing a few hours
yep,
without even realizing it
and
is
that's me
exactly
booting
where
up
you
the
want a game
game,
like this
right?
to be.
Exactly, and I played some today as well. So let me get on with what is supposed to be my impressions of the first, like, 2 hours of the game. 7 hours in. So here's my it's been a busy day. Um,
That's a good chunk of time. That's a
I
good
think
impression.
so, right?
7
That's yeah,
hours?
oh,
Come
yeah,
on.
yeah. And I made another sale for him today as well. But let's go into it. So if you've played Vampire Survivors or Potato, other games like that, you'll know what this is about. It's sort of an auto shooter or a survivor like, whatever you want to call the genre. It's Vampire Survivors, but it's with set in the world using the IP of Deep Rock Galactic, which is a game I never actually got a chance to play. I know that for a lot of people that was like a big hit, sort of during some of the lockdowns. Big multiplayer game. It was on
Yeah.
Game Pass, I believe, until sort of the end of 2020, start of 2021. People really liked it. I never really got to have a chance,
I
but
played
I'm
it a
from.
bit. I have a friend that's a really big fan of it, and
Oh, really?
wrote yeah, it was like, I went to, like, a barbecue, and he had a bunch of us play, and, he kinda wrote me into it. It's fun, it's
Yeah.
definitely, like, a good solid, it makes sense to me that it popped off during that time when people were
Hmm.
looking for things to do with buddies. Like, I think if you have a regular multiplayer clique that you play with, Deep Rock Galactic is definitely a game to take a look at for sure.
Yes, yeah, definitely seen like that. And I think, what I know of that is it did have a lot of personality. There's sort of a sense of humor to it. And a lot of that does pull through into this. It's got the personality. It's got a lot of the elements that when I'm playing it, I'm like, I can see how this would fit into what I know of Deep Rock
Mhm.
Galactic. It's also really good looking. It's got sort of bright colors and explosions, but because it's underground, it's also quite dark. And on the OLED as well, like the difference between the darkness and the unknown, and you're sort of moving around, and then the brightness and the glowing colors and the glowing enemies and stuff. It looks really nice. It really pops on the OLED screen. Um, so I'll get into a bit about what the game actually, what you're actually doing in the game. So you're sort of roaming around just like you do in Vampire Survivors, shooting enemies, and it sort of automatically fires like you expect it to. But in this one, there's a unique thing where there is an element of mining in it. So there's sort of a lot of rocks around the map, and like huge just areas of rock. And when you approach them, you mine them to sort of clear paths for yourself and stuff like that.
So
You
talk to me about how that works. So if I'm mining, is there like a risk reward to mining? Like while you're mining, are your defenses lowered? Are you more vulnerable to attack? Or is it kind of one of those things where like I'm imagining, in a run on Vampire Survivors when you are, a couple levels in and maybe you've gotten a couple upgrades on the map or whatever, and you hit that kind of equilibrium point where you can stand still and enemies will just delete themselves. Like, is it one of those things where you want to be building up your powers so that you can go and mine to get more powerful? Or is it like, I've hit a certain amount of strength, let me clear out some enemies and then try to mine and clear and mine? And like, I'm
there,
interested in how those two systems interact.
There's definitely a balance there. So it's the mining seems to be for a few different things. There's like one, I think it is an obstacle. It is designed to be in your way. So unlike Vampire Survivors, where it is quite open, this is very much like I want to go this way and there's rocks here, so I'm now slowed down trying to mine through these rocks. There are
Okay.
gems and stuff dotted around the rocks. There's different kinds of gems. There's sort of like gold and there's nitra. I think it's nitra, and those two are between the floors of each level, which I'll get into in a bit. Between those, you can spend those two currencies, and you lose those currencies at the end of your run when you die or you complete it. And then there's other gems that are dotted around that are different colors. Uh, they You collect them, and outside of the game, in between like full like runs of the game, or dives they call them. You want to be saving up those currencies to upgrade yourself more permanently. So similar to like Hades, for example, where like, oh no, I've died, but in that time I was able to pick up some keys and some other things that I could then spend to upgrade myself, so that when I start next time, it's easier. And there's a lot of that. But in terms of like when you're sort of mining in the game, depends on your weapon, because there are going to be weapons that will automatically just aim at enemies. There are going to be weapons that fire out in all sorts of different directions, and there are going to be weapons that they only fire forward. So there's a few characters that have their own base weapon, much like Vampire Survivors, but instead of it being like 8 or 9, so far there's only 4 characters, and they all start with
Do
a
you have
different
them already
weapon.
away or do you have to
You
unlock
start
them?
with one character, and then that one character has like one, um, like a set, I guess, like one sort of like starting
Like, this
set.
is the starting ability that they have or the starting
Yeah,
item or
starting
what yeah,
weapon. Yeah, yeah.
totally.
But then each of the characters has like different stats. So it might have like more armor. It might have more faster mining. It might have a faster move speed. They all start with a different weapon. So you might just have a weapon that aims at the nearest enemy. You might have one that only shoots forward if you're facing them. You might have one that sort of fires in all directions. Or there's a character who only has weapons that when you're standing still and not moving, it plants down drones or like turrets. So that was quite a tough one because I'm so used to moving around. Like to stand still to attack was weird for me. Um, but each one of those, then you unlock more aspects for them. So you might be able to go for the first character who just has the starting gun, which aims at enemies. You might then swap to a version of that that has a light gun, but you unlock that later down the line, and that has, there's like you say, a risk reward there of like I would like to be able to, control where I shoot or cover more ground, but I'll be more vulnerable because I might run out of bullets quicker or something like that. And so depending on the gun you have, you could be mining quite happily and shooting people, or you could be like, right, I really need to clear this out because I want this specific currency, or the health is also a gem. Once you just you have to mine health for yourself. I'm using a lot of that throughout this discussion, I think, of me pretending to mine. But also that the rocks can be used in different ways. So you could even create a shortcut for yourself, or bottleneck enemies. So you could like dig a little hole, and there are some enemies you can dig, and a lot of them that can't. So if you want to sort of really cram them through into one space, you can then start clearing them out. But there are going to be enemies that come from behind you, so you're not always safe. You can't just create yourself a little bottleneck and just win, because eventually something's going to spawn behind you. And unlike Vampire Survivors, the maps here aren't endless, so there are edges to the map. So you could accidentally sort of mine yourself into a corner and be like, "Well,
That's
shit, there's nowhere for me
interesting.
to go," or the map at the top has like clearly defined edges to it. So you because unlike Vampire Survivors, this isn't endless. This isn't like play for 30 minutes and then you can survive past 30 minutes in Vampire Survivors eventually. This is very much like you have a goal. Your goal is to survive long enough to beat a mini boss at the end of a floor and then get back to your ship within 30 seconds. If you die or you don't make it back to the ship, then game over. If you do, you move on to the next level. Next level, it's the same thing: survive, kill an enemy, and there's 5 levels per map. And then on the fifth level, there's like 4 mini bosses and a main boss. Again, fit all of those, get back to your ship, game ends. You've completed that run, and then when you complete the run, there are you unlock things like you do in Vampire Survivors. You unlock new weapons, you unlock new little collectibles, you
How does it
unlock.
how does it work if you have a failed run? Like, if your run, goes south, do you lose certain things that you were gonna get? Do you get as much experience as you have already earned? Like, what's the progression look like there?
You don't necessarily lose anything. You just don't. You all the weapons you've been upgrading at the time. But if you're working on goals like upgrade a weapon to level 12, that goes back to zero. If you're
Sure, of course.
all of your gold and stuff you've been collecting, you lose all of that.
So there
Um,
is still a sense of, like, a failed run still progresses your overall character progression
yes,
and
yeah,
everything. That's
yeah.
cool.
Like I mentioned about Hades earlier, you're mining these things
Right.
that might not help you now, but when you're out of the game, it's like, oh, cool, I can go and upgrade this. And now when I start, I'll start with a faster move speed or a faster mining
That's
speed, or,
good.
or.
I think that's important for games like that to feel forgiving and, like, especially to encourage you to experiment with, like, different characters and stuff, because it's like you don't
Yes.
wanna have a run feel like it just didn't matter, you know? That's, like, always really
Yes. Yeah.
frustrating in a game like that. I remember feeling that way, like, in late game in Hades, where it was like, I'm not really achieving anything if I'm not getting farther, right?
Yeah.
Whereas,
And
like,
I had that in Vampire Survivors as well, where
yeah.
you can play games of Vampire Survivors and unlock 6 things and be like, "Yes," and then you can have a game where you've unlocked nothing, and you're like, "Oh, well, okay."
Sure, and that's something I always really appreciated about, like, Cult of the Lamb recently,
Mhm.
comes to mind, where it's like, even a garbage run, like, I'm gonna get some resources, and I'm gonna have something to show for the time that I invested, right? Like, even if I
Yes,
made a
yeah.
mistake or the build I tried didn't work and, I get my clock cleaned, it's like, "Okay, like, I got some experience, let's try again."
Yeah, this very much feels like that. I mean, it's only early access, so there's only like 19 achievements. There is a bunch of other stuff that isn't tied to an achievement. There's stuff that's a milestone that is similar to Vampire Survivors. You unlock a certain thing. So you complete an achievement, you unlock a thing. Only 19 of those are actual Steam achievements. There are loads, dozens in the actual thing, and they're all sort of related to unlocking weapons, unlocking new characters, new weapons, things like that. So there is a lot of
Do they have
progression
a
going on.
roadmap, in mind yet? Like, obviously, it's in early access. Have they talked about, like, when they envision 1.0 coming out? Have they talked about how many characters there are gonna be, or,
You'd
like,
think I'd
levels,
know
anything
that.
like that?
You'd think I'd know that, but I
I
actually
I
I
would think
actually
so.
I yeah, but I don't. I don't know that. I probably should
I'm
look that
like,
up really.
I'll let you steer the sh I'll just ask the questions, baby. That's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
wealth of
I should
knowledge
have
over here.
I should look that up, but
That's alright, that's alright.
I know well, I mean, it's only come out last week, so I assume they're probably dealing with quite a lot right now. But yeah, and there's clearly lots of plans. There's lots of things they're planning on doing. There's only sort of 3 levels so far. There's a lot of difficulty levels that you can unlock as well. There's a lot of content already here for. So I can imagine that even if nothing happens for like, I don't know, let's say a year, um,
There's still a lot to
there's
get
still
into.
a lot to get through here. Similar to how Vampire Survivors had a lot to get through.
So talk to me real quick about the levels thing, because I am a little confused, I guess. You're saying there's 3 levels right now. So you're saying that that's 3 levels, like, and that's your run? Like, it's you beat 1 level, you get to level 2, then level 3, then it's over? Or is it there are 3 different starting levels, and then each of those levels has the 2 or 3 tiers until you get to the
So
endpoint?
it's 2 or 3 maps. So you start off in, like, the Crystal
Gotcha, okay.
Caverns, then there's a Magma Caverns. I don't think I've unlocked the 3rd one yet, so I don't know what the 3rd one is. And then each one of those, has 5 floors.
Uh-huh.
So floor 1 through 4, you're doing the same thing. There's different events that happen as well. There's, like, a timeline at the top, and, I can't remember. I haven't yet worked out if the timeline is based on time or if it's based on the amount of enemies you've killed. I think it's time. But, you'll see at the top, like, there'll be an icon that has, like, 3 enemies, and that means there's going to be a swarm, and a swarm means that like a bunch of fucking enemies start coming at you, like loads of them. It gets really ropey, and there'll be like one for a mini boss spawning. There'll be one for a supply drop beacon that appears on the map, and you need to go to that map and clear the area of debris while there's enemies coming at you. Um, and then sort of your supply drop drops in, which gives you another like a pickup or an upgrade or something.
That's really cool.
Um, yeah, and then so you get through that timeline, beat the mini boss at the end, get to your ship, and that can be tough as well because there have been times when I've sort of like beaten the mini boss and then been like, I've got 30 seconds to get to my ship, which doesn't seem too bad. But when there's a fuckload of enemies coming after you and there's loads of rocks in your way, and maybe
Yeah.
there's like a side quest, little side quest you haven't done yet, you're like, oh, maybe I'll do this up. That gets quite tough. But
Okay. So I like that. That's interesting. So because that was gonna be one of my questions is like you identified a few things about how it's different than Vampire Survivors. Um, and some of them seem significant, some of them seem not like they don't matter, but I just mean like, it's like it feels like a small difference rather than like a
mhm,
major innovation. My question to you coming into this was gonna be how do you think it stacks up in that regard, right? Because I think that's always an interesting question for me when you have a popular game like Vampire Survivors come out and, really catch people's attention. And, obviously it didn't invent this genre, but I think it kind of put this genre on the map. And now,
mhm,
you even alluded to the idea of people calling them, survivors likes and
survivor
things like
likes,
that,
yeah,
right? That it's like, uh, this is now the game you think of when you think of this kind of game. Cool. So, what does Deep Rock Galactic Survivor do to set itself apart, right? Like it even has Survivor in the name. It's kind of inviting that comparison
mhm,
to Vampire Survivors, right? And like Vampire Survivors is a game that's like, I already own it. It's actively being updated, right? Like if I don't own one of these games, it's $2, right? Like, you know, what is and maybe that's a loaded question, but I think it invites that comparison, right? So like, do you think what Deep Rock Galactic Survivor is doing here, like these other systems, the mining, the boss system, the having a more you know, like level based progression that has that run at the end where you need to get back to your ship. Like those are all very different gameplay mechanics. And I think that to me, that sounds very refreshing to not just have it be like, hey, we're just doing Vampire Survivors with our skin over it,
mhm.
right? Like it feels like they're trying to innovate. Do you think those innovations are meaningful? Are they adding to the formula in a big way? Is it a thing where you're like, oh, like I am finding myself, in these 7 hours, right? Like, I maybe like this even more than Vampire Survivors in some way. Or are you having those moments of like, it's cool that they're trying other things, but it doesn't feel as good as Vampire Survivors?
So I think Vampire Survivors has lots of things going for it. I think the half an hour element of it of like, just survive half an hour, while it seems fairly simple at the start, things can get crazy, right? Things can get manic and it can get like overwhelmingly like you say, there are times where you could just stand still and the game will be running at 5 FPS and it'll be, there will just be things churning and spinning and enemies will just be
It's
dying and
exploding
blah blah
all
blah.
around
And
you.
things get crazy and there's crazy combinations you can do. This so far, and again, this is like, this is only just launched. It's in early access. There is a roadmap that came out yesterday, FYI. I've just spotted, but there's a lot of it's not as crazy as that so far, but there is a lot of stuff like the way the weapons work is cool. The way that the overclocking, you can upgrade your weapons and overclock. And I do think that for now, Vampire Survivors, because it is a 1.0 game or has had its 1.0 release, and has benefited from like 2 years now of nearly of updates, and it's probably it's cheaper as well. I would say Vampire Survivors. If you're looking just to play then this style of game, I would recommend Vampire Survivors wholly, absolutely. But I do think that if you played Vampire Survivors and you know you like this kind of game and maybe you've got what you need out of it, or you want to try something that's similar to Vampire Survivors and try something new, maybe something that's, visually this is much nicer to look at the Vampire Survivors. It's got
Sure.
more, it's got like voice acting. It's a little bit different. It's got a more of a focus on bosses and the fact that you can complete it as well. Like that's a big thing. You can beat a run and there's an obvious goal here of like go here, do this. It's not endless. You know, it feels it feels like while the minute to minute stuff of like I'm shooting myself and the game shooting itself and I'm roaming around sort of just killing enemies, that stuff feels very much like Vampire Survivors. The other stuff of um, the swarms
Like,
and
what you're
the
actually doing, right? Like, the fact that
yeah,
there are, like,
yeah.
events and things like that.
Yeah, that seems interesting, and I feel like now in the sort of version we're in right now, I know what's coming, but I think that there's gonna be time for them to add more events, more, uh, more weapons, more
Yeah,
more more unique
absolutely,
things
right?
to happen,
Just
more
just more
bosses.
unique, water cooler moments, like, more
Yeah,
variance in those
exactly.
events, for sure.
Exactly, but I do think that what is they have now is more than enough. For the 7 hours I've played, I'm addicted, I wanna play more, I'm not like, "Oh, I'm running out of content because so far I've only unlocked 2 of the biomes, I've unlocked the second difficulty on the first biome. As I'm playing, I'm unlocking new stuff, and that is, new characters, new difficulty levels. There's then challenges in those difficulty levels. So, similar to Vampire Survivors where there's, like, loads to do. Because the thing with Vampire Survivors is once you've done it, there's nothing to do, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
once you've done all the achievements,
Yeah.
it's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna play this game now," but you get to the end of it and you're like, "Alright, well, I didn't achieve anything there, I didn't
Well,
gain
and
anything
also,
new," and
I think part of the problem for me with Vampire Survivors, and, like, I haven't gotten into the DLC or anything, and maybe those things would address this problem, but, like, I hit a point where I was like, "Well, like, I unlocked every guy, and all my
Mhm.
guys are maxed out, so now it's just, like, it's easy now to do a run," right? Where it's like when
Yes,
you first
yeah.
started playing, I couldn't get through a run for the first few times, right? Like, it's like, "Oh, I made it 8 minutes, I made it 12 minutes, I made it," and it was that steady progression, and then you hit
Yeah.
a point where it's like, "Okay, like, I'm kicking ass now," and it just kinda,
Yeah.
you
I've
know, the
unlocked all the weapons. I know how to
yeah,
combine them properly.
and
I'm
I know the
guaranteed to get
secrets, I know what I'm looking for, I know what builds
yeah.
I like, whatever, like,
Yes.
you once you've kinda solved the puzzle, it's like, "Okay, like, I got," at
Yeah.
least I felt like I got my fill, and, I think that's part of why it probably didn't land as high for me on my list as you guys was I kinda was like, "Oh, I really enjoyed this game," but I hit a point where I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good, like,
Yeah.
I got it." To me, like, all the stuff you're talking about is intriguing to me because it's like, "Oh, cool." It's like that core gameplay loop that I liked, but they're trying to introduce these new systems and these new mechanics that, like, I feel like
Yes.
deepen things a little bit maybe, or let, like, at least add, like, a new element to it that, like, I could see there being more repeatability of, like,
Mhm.
"Oh, we made a new map and there's a new boss and you have to beat that boss in a different way," or, like,
Yeah.
I could see how you could evolve on some of these things and have that formula stay fresh, uh, maybe
Absolutely, yeah.
longer than Vampire Survivors did for me personally, but I know Steve put, like, 1,000 hours into that game.
Oh,
So,
Steve
like, your
Steve played
mileage may
loads.
vary, you know?
Exactly, yeah, but I do see this being like, there are more whereas in Vampire Survivors, the sort of wow element of it comes from like, "Oh, look how many enemies there are on screen, and I'm still killing everyone," whereas the wow moments of this are happening a lot earlier for me. So me and my boss were playing today. It's not multiplayer, uh, just to not get anyone's hopes up there, but he I
I was
showed
gonna say, is there multiplayer? No?
No, it's not. It's single player only. He was watching me play over my shoulder, and he was like, "What is this?" And I explained it to him, and then within like 10 minutes, he had bought it on his ROG Ally,
Nice.
which I bullied him into buying last week just so I could play with one. And he shout out to Barry by the way for playing this. Then he had the game, and yeah, we were ended up playing like 3 runs together, and it's very what was my point? Oh yeah, so unlike Vampire Survivor, it's like, oh, I've played like 10 hours of this game. I'm right at the end of this run. And look at all this crazy stuff's happening. It's like, oh, I'm on my third run, and there's exploding enemies here that have caused a chain reaction, and there's loads of stuff going on, and
That's
like
cool.
this is crazy, but it's not happening. I don't have to play through like hours of like, what am I doing here to get there? It's like it's very much immediately like this is fun, this is exciting, and
Yeah.
I think Vampire Survivors is the part of the charm of it is that it feels inaccessible or that it feels like obtuse. And it this doesn't have that. This very much is like I'm picking up this game and I'm playing this game, and this is immediately feels good. It immediately looks good. I immediately know what my goal is.
So what's the vibe on getting a second code, you think, though? hook me up, or it
I'll
sounds
see
pretty
what I
fun.
can.
I wanna
I'll
play.
see. I'll ask. I'll see what I can do.
Because if they will, I'd love to play. It sounds really fun.
Yeah. I really feel like you'd like this. I think Steve would really like this. I really think
Yeah.
that this is one that I think if I told Steve to play, he'd really enjoy this.
If he had been around this week, he would have taken that code.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's only the fact that I was free and I was like, yeah, I could probably chuck an hour or two into it, and then yeah, it's consumed my
Come
free
back
time.
and catch us, find your eyes like all dilated, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. So that is
Yeah, man. Sounds
whatever
great.
game.
I'm
Yeah.
really excited to get into this one.
Mhm.
I'm not usually a guy for, like, early access, but, like, I don't know, this sounds really fun, and,
Yeah, I
I kinda
see
could
mys
use a new TV game, you know?
yeah, this
I
feels
need
like that.
like, a good, you know, just, like, button presser like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I
this
guess
was a
not
good
really, stick pusher.
sick pusher. This was good in bed last night. That's a weird sentence. This was fine. This is good, like, just before going to sleep last night when, Kat wanted to spend some time looking at TikTok, and I was like, "Cool, I'll play this." She did make me turn the volume down because there's a lot of, like, shooting and enemies dying, but yeah,
Yeah,
it was great, it
yeah.
was great. I'm
Vampire
looking at
Survivors is one of those games where I remember, I forget, somebody was talking about the soundtrack at one point, and I was like, "I actually don't think I know what it
there
sounds
was
like,"
music?
'cause there's so much explosions happening, I'm like, "I
Yeah.
gotta turn the sound down on this."
I remember, like, as a kid, I my dad never lets have our Game Boys turned up, and I feel like there's something with a handheld game sometimes where I still get that guilt
Yeah.
of, like, "This is a bit loud." I don't know what I don't have any nostalgia for a lot of the old Pokemon soundtracks for that reason, which is really sad for me, but
It's so funny because, like, I remember, I was so into the music and, like, in many situations that was, like, at my grandparents' house, they'd be like, "You gotta turn that shit off. Like, you
you're
gotta
like,
mute
"No."
that." And I would carry around like, little Sony, like, over ear headphones so that I could jam to them.
Listen to it. I think the one song I do remember from Pokemon is when I got to Lance at the end of the Elite Four. This is in I had Yellow, and maybe this is actually in Silver. I can't remember. But anyway, the battle music for that was so good. The one that goes didn't 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 didn't. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember locking myself in the toilet so I could play that at full blast with the acoustics of that
So
without
good.
anyone telling me off. That was good.
The,
But
like the pauses in that are just so fucking dramatic. It's so
mhm.
good. Yo, Masuda, get back into chiptunes, my guy. Stop producing
Yeah.
games. Start producing bops
Sick,
again.
very sick. I can just while before we move on for this, I'm looking at the roadmap now. It looks like they've got a new biome planned. They've got new artifacts, new overclocks, which is like when you upgrade your weapons planned. There's new things you can change in the biomes. They're adding new missions, new stage events, more bosses, more cargo crates. There's a lot going on here. I think extra mods, and there's an endless mode for those that do like that when Vampire Survivor. So there's a lot planned here. In early access, it's only about £10. I don't know what that is in dollars because don't need to know that. But yeah, this seems like it's a great deal. I'm really enjoying it. I look forward to talking about this more, and I
Probably.
probably will end up coming back to talk more about this next week, or not next week, the week after, because as originally planned, because I'll have more time with the game. So yeah, big fan.
And you're gonna get your buddy Pete a
I'm
copy.
good. I'll ask. I'll see what I can do. I'll have a chat. I'll have a chat.
It looks like it's actually $10, American too. So
Oh,
there you
okay.
go.
Oh, well sorted. Yeah. So yeah, that's that.
I love when I feel like indies are like the only ones that will like where it's just like it's just this is what it is. It's
Yeah, yeah. There's
flat, you
no
know? It's like, all right,
70,
great, awesome.
60. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
don't have to
yeah.
do any conversions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
So
awesome.
that's taken up a lot more of the show than I thought I was gonna take up, but
Hey,
let's move on with some more content, shall
let's
we?
move on. Yeah. We're gonna jump into the Steam docket and answer some of your questions because guess what? You can write in with your questions at flipscreen.games. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the Steam Deck podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of February. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Lenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobe, Snackigo, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats, and also Boobies, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. You're all the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to write in to the Steam docket, if you want to get your thoughts read on the air, if you want to get involved in this or any of our sister shows, or you just want to keep the conversation rolling between episodes over on the Discord, head over to flipscreen.games and click on some links, however you choose to get involved and show your support. It really helps us out, and we greatly appreciate you for tuning in to another episode of the Steam Deck podcast.
Thank you very much. I never remembered that, so I'm glad that you were here to do it for me.
I gotta be honest with you, like I forgot that you were hosting, and I dissociated and just went through it, you know?
I would have passed on to you anyway after the housekeeping because I don't remember any of the other bits. I'm sure if you asked me, I could tell you, but I just when it comes to it, I'm just like, this is Pete's job. Anyway, Steam Docket. You guys wrote in with some questions. The first one comes from Jazzy Jeff 7770, who commented on last week's episode of the Steam Deck podcast, asking the following.
And I'll say this, he commented over on YouTube, which is
Yeah,
something that I know we don't always pull comments over from YouTube because, we get a lot that are not really questions or anything like that. Write in with some questions, YouTube people. This was great. Thank you, Jazzy
yeah,
Jeff.
yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much. You've
Hey,
given us a lot.
Jazzy Jeff, big fan of your work, you know?
Yeah, yeah, the Jazzy Jeff.
Yeah.
So Jazzy Jeff 7770 says, "Is it worth investing £500 for the Steam Deck OLED for my son who wants to game while we watch TV? What concerns me is that this device won't be able to handle AAA games in the future, as we are currently facing issues with running games like Helldivers 2." Now, I wanted to get some clarification on this, so here's sort of a bit more background on
I
on
love this. You
on
you went
this.
and followed up with Jazzy Jeff and asked questions on the YouTube to be like, "Let me get some clarifying information beforehand."
Yeah, I don't want to mislead him. I don't want to mislead the
Oh, it's
audience. You know,
great.
I want everyone to know what page we're on. So I asked sort of just a couple of questions, and the information I have here is that the son currently doesn't own a deck. This will be his first one. He does have a Steam library, so some indie games and some
And
FPS
do he
stuff.
doesn't does dad own a deck?
Not as far as I know, because I feel like these then we wouldn't need questions like this. Maybe.
I don't know though,
That's a
because I
good
mean,
point. I
maybe
didn't
he
get that.
owns a Steam Deck for himself.
I didn't check that. That's why you're making my work look sloppy. But I don't
No,
think he
no,
does because yeah.
not
But
sloppy. It's fine. It's reasonable that you didn't ask every conceivable
that's
follow-up
true.
question.
That is
That's
true.
fine.
Um,
I'm just trying to get a full picture here. That's all right. Go ahead.
So the son also he owns a PS5 and has a TV in his room, but he just wants to chill with his family, play on a handheld device, so he can be in the living room with them or in the backyard when they're doing a barbecue.
Okay.
He apparently plays games quite regularly, has a lot of platform games, plays Star Wars, Ratchet and Clank, Horizon Forbidden West, FIFA, and Apex Legends,
Hmm.
Hitman, Death Stranding, and loads of indie games. So that's
Gosh,
quite a
man,
wide
what a
spread.
I see he is a man of culture as
Yeah,
well. This
right.
young man of culture. Look at him.
Should have asked how old he was as well, because this is a good spread of like all
Yeah.
sorts of things. And games that he wants to.
Yeah, like a good varied appetite, right? Like he's
Yeah,
playing some of the Sony first party stuff. He's got some big multiplayer titles.
yeah,
We got some little guys in there. It's
yeah.
good stuff.
I'm gonna guess that from the word barbecue and, FIFA, that this is a British person, so, howdy.
The pound
Um,
sign too, right? So I think it is a Brit.
oh, yeah,
500, right?
yeah, that's a really easy clue there that I could have
Yeah,
used at the
I know a
start,
thing or
but
two about England, Max,
yeah.
you know?
Name 5 currencies, you're such a big currency fan. Games that he wants to play on the Steam Deck or another handheld are Street Fighter 6, Hades, Diablo, Helldivers, Resident Evil 4, Alan Wake 2. Again, what a fantastic spread.
Right? Yeah,
Just some
bangers.
fantastic games in
Just
there.
bangers.
Yeah, Hades, Resident Evil 4, Alan Wake 2, great games. Helldivers is good.
So,
Um, yeah,
my
let's go in.
my gut reaction to this is yes. I think the OLED Steam
Yeah.
Deck seems like it would be a good solution for you guys, for a couple reasons, right? I would say for starters, most of the games that you've listed here work on Steam Deck.
Yeah, the only one that I don't think does is Alan Wake 2, and that's, it struggled on my PC because it does have a lot going on for it,
Right.
but also it's an Epic Game Store exclusive. Doesn't benefit from, like, shader caches or anything like that. You'd have to
Yeah.
install it and, through, like, Heroic Launcher or something, and then there's, issues with compatibility there, so that's the only game that doesn't run.
But my thing is too, Alan and correct me if Alan Wake 2 is on PS5,
It
right?
is on PS5, yes.
So you go and use our PS5 streaming tutorial, and we'll link that to you in the comment. We'll reply to you,
Mhm.
Jazzy, and make sure you get this as well. But yeah, we've got our
Jackie for deck.
Jackie for Deck tutorial that you can check out, and you'll be able to use that to have your son be able to stream any of his PlayStation games uh, directly to his Steam Deck. And if you do that, I would say any of the games that don't run natively on Deck, you can get on his PS5 and stream to wherever you guys are in the house. And then when wants to eventually retire to his room, he plays it on the
Yeah,
TV. And that's
and
what I would do, right? Like any of the games that you might wanna play on TV, just get on PS5 and stream if you just need to, like, be able to hang out around the house. And
yeah.
then all the games that, are more at home on deck, then great, grab them on deck.
that's how I've been playing Elden Ring recently. It's how I played the God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. I use my PC more than my deck, and I was playing Alan Wake 2 through that. Helldivers, I've been playing some Helldivers streamed to the Steam Deck as well, just because I wanted to sort of get around that performance issue, which was a worry for you before. Now, you could, in this instance, if you were only interested in pursuing that, PS Portal is £200 and does a lot of that. The only issue there you're going to get into is that when you do want to play in the back garden, for example, or you decide to go on a flight or you're away.
I think you're just more limited there. Like, I think
Yeah.
I'm just gonna call we're just gonna call him Jeff Jr., Jazzy Jeff Jr. If Jazzy Jeff Jr. is playing indie games and stuff, then he should just have a Steam Deck, right?
Yeah.
Like, if he wanted to play like 1 or 2 games that were on PS5, and then I would be like, sure, you get the Portal and save yourself a couple $100. But like, it sounds like he would get a lot out of a Steam Deck, and there's a pretty small amount of things he would want to do on it that he couldn't do on deck, and he could do them on his existing PS5 and just stream to his deck.
Yeah.
So to me, that sounds like the better way to go. I'll say
I
this as
agree.
well, though. I'll link to our review. We did do a review of PS Portal. We had a friend of the show, Snackago, do a review of that as well. So you can check that out if you want to consider that as an option. It is quite a bit cheaper. But I would say that based on what it sounds like your son is interested in doing and like what his kind of overall gaming habits and tastes are, I feel like he'll get a lot more mileage out of the Steam Deck in general. And I think it's a device that will grow with him. One thing I do want to say, Max, is uh, he said the thing about I have concerns about it not being able to handle AAA games in the future as they're currently facing issues running games like Helldivers 2. I have two thoughts there. That to me feels like it's implying that they own a Steam Deck and it's having trouble running Helldivers.
I thought that, but I actually think that the we is the royal we, as in us as a collective. I think it means that because the video they commented on was about Helldivers 2 performance, that they're
Right.
saying, I'm what is the device going to be able to handle AAA games in the future
Okay.
if it's already having problems with Helldivers 2? I don't think they currently have a Steam Deck to have tried Helldivers 2. That's just my
Okay.
understanding of it. That I actually think that what they mean is I'm worried about the future because it's 2024 and we're already struggling to run a
Okay.
AAA game from
Well,
this
I
year.
would say I based on both of those interpretations, I have worthwhile context that I think I would consider as a consumer. I
Mhm.
think AAA games are going to be hit or miss. There are some that'll work well, there are some that will not, and that's just going to be a Russian roulette thing. I would not assume you can play your AAA games on Steam Deck. That should not be the primary reason that you buy it. That said, I'm surprised by how many come out and do work or get
Yep.
patches that make them work shortly after or that come up with like a fan solution or something like that.
Mhm.
Like it I think you'll be pleasantly surprised how many you can get away with. But again, with Chiaki, you got a PlayStation 5 ready. You're fine. Just buy
Yeah.
them there. That'll
Yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah. There are games that do work. So I actually put a list together here of things that sort of games from last year, 2023 AAA games that I have personally played or know run well on deck. Sorry. So you got things like Diablo 4, Resident Evil 4, Jedi Survivor, Starfield, Street Fighter 6, Hi-Fi Rush, Lies of P, Dead Space, and Hogwarts Legacy are all games that run really well on Steam Deck. And they're all sort of newer AAA games. There are going to be things that don't run like Alan Wake 2, but and already this year we've already seen Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, Tekken 8, and Helldivers 2 and like Dragon Infinite Wealth, they all run, uh, you know, maybe with Helldivers there's been a little bit of problems with it, but it still runs, and I think a lot of these games do run well enough. And I also think you need to just consider that it's a handheld as well, and that it's not gonna be the same as a PS5, and that maybe 30 FPS for some of these games is fine. I try and eke out as much as I can, and with the OLED I can get a 45 FPS usually and be pretty happy with it. And we've got guides about getting some slightly better performance by using things like cryo utilities and things like that. Do we have a guide on that, or have I just misspoken?
I don't think we have a guide on it. I think we've talked about it on the podcast, so maybe you put that together because I think that's probably something that would be worth doing.
Probably that would be helpful for people,
Um,
wouldn't it? Because I think there was a comment that someone said on the last week's video where they said, "Oh, I was wondering why I wasn't getting the performance, and it's probably because you have cryo utilities and didn't mention it." And they are right. I did not mention cryo utilities. I have used cryo utilities to do whatever that should does. I don't know. I'm not Steve. That
to
that
make stuff good.
to make stuff better. I did mention that I have done that to my Steam Deck, and that probably is helping me get that sort of good,
Mhm.
better performance. Also, finally on sort of games, I actually intend on playing all of the games that we spoke about in this week's Flip Screen Games podcast, we spoke about all the games in 2024 we're most looking forward to. I intend on playing every single one of those games on my Steam Deck. And also, we had the Nintendo Direct that showed a bunch of stuff that's coming this year. And all of those games I will be playing on Steam Deck. Another Crab's Treasure, End of Magnolia, Epic Mickey Rebrush, Pepper Grinder, Penny's Big Breakaway. They're not like big AAA games, but they are all games that I fully intend on playing on the Steam Deck. And I think most of this year, the games I'm going to be playing will be on Steam Deck because it's my preferred way to play. But I think if you because it is so versatile, you can mix and match between I'm going to play this game, all these smaller games on the Steam Deck downstairs on the or I'll play it on the plane or in the garden or whatever, and then have the knowledge that if I do want to play something like Alan Wake 2 or Helldivers or something like that, that you can buy it on PlayStation and still get a good experience and still be able to sort of have the full controls. You still get the haptics. You can still plug headphones into it and use the pass through mic if you're playing with friends. Like that, you have that versatility. You have that option, which I think puts it for me above like a PS Portal. And
Definitely.
also the Steam Deck being that much cheaper than like an ROG Ally, for example. Um, Also, just even the version you're thinking of, the sort of £470 version, you're spending an extra hundred and something pounds to get the ROG Ally, and even then, it's not as seamless an experience as the Steam Deck, as I've sort of experienced with my my bosses recently.
Yeah, yeah. We've talked a lot about it. The Windows experience is just not there yet.
Yeah.
Whereas like obviously SteamOS is great and it's
Oh
constantly
yeah.
evolving.
Yes. Yeah.
The other thing I did want to say was that if the other interpretation is correct and you already own a Steam Deck and you're struggling with Helldivers, the performance increases on the OLED are significant. And we've talked about that in a couple previous episodes that I'll link to in the card up there, and I'll send it to you as well. But you can see like we did a conversation about like uh why it's worth getting one, and I think a lot of people are obviously focused on like better screen and better battery life, and like those things are obviously great, but you're looking at a performance increase of like up to like 10% on a lot of games, and that is kind of the difference between some of these AAA games working and not working, you know? Like Starfield is a great one that I remember when it came out, right? It was struggling and they were able to kind of get it there. And on OLED, it definitely has an easier time, right? On Helldivers 2 has an easier time on OLED. So that's worth considering too, right? Like that $500 or pounds in your case, it does come with a bit of a performance increase if you are used to the base deck experience.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I hope that thoroughly answers your question because as soon as I saw this, I was like, right, let's get some information. Let's cover this. So yeah, thanks for
We're
listening.
evangelists. We're out here to get
Oh
you
yeah.
to and if it's not the right product for you, we'll steer you towards the right one. But I think
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
case, I think you and Jazzy Jeff Jr. will enjoy a Steam Deck OLED in the family. Also, I just want to say real quick, Jazzy Jeff, two things. First of all, think it's appreciate you right into the show. Really great to hear from somebody new. Two, I think it's really sweet that your kid wants to like this solution is because he wants to come and hang out with the family while he's gaming.
Yeah.
It's really nice. Sounds like
I
your
think that's
family's
sweet.
close, and I'm sure that that's because you're probably doing something right. So,
Yeah.
good on you, buddy. Sounds like
Or,
you're a good dad.
sorry, carry on.
That's it.
Oh, okay. Well, I was gonna say, or it could be that because, we're in a cost of living crisis over here, that it's just cheaper to heat the living room by itself, and he's fed up of freezing upstairs in his bedroom. It could
That was the
could be an
advantage of the
option.
PS4. It was also a space heater.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Steam Deck does get quite warm in your hands if you're playing things like Helldivers.
That's true.
So, yeah. So, yeah, thanks for writing in. Really appreciate that. If you do end up getting a Steam Deck, let us know, and let us know what games you play. Really interested
Yeah.
to see how your journey goes
Or if we can
if,
make some more recommendations or something.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's move on to the next question, which is from Scale Speeder in the Discord. Now, funnily enough, this question perfectly leads into something I wanted to talk about anyway. So
And it's like a
great.
great segue out of that one. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
a show we got today, Max.
Yeah, we do. We really, really do. Who needs Steve? I need Steve. Steve, come back next week, please. I
Miss you.
miss you.
Baby,
Um,
come back. You can blame it all on Max.
Musical podcast. That's a concept. We'd have to hide the fact there are musical in the trailers, though. That seems to be the trend right now. But anyhow, Scale Speeder writes in and says, I've been playing a lot of Fallout 4 on my Steam Deck and it runs great, being a game released in 2015. I didn't play it on release as I was much more into multiplayer shooters. Are there any older games that you've been playing that perhaps you missed or dismissed on initial release, and now that you're playing, you are it is impressing you with how well or not it runs on the deck? Now, I wanted to talk about this because I actually have been playing Tomb Raider all of this week on Steam Deck, the 2013 reboot, And the whole time I've been playing it, I've been just so impressed by that I'm getting. I can play it on high settings. I'm getting like a locked 90 FPS. It looks great. There's no sort of slowdown. The controls just work. I'm getting like a decent sort of battery life on it. And I was thinking that like there's definitely a sweet spot of games that run really well on the Steam Deck, and they have a perfect balance of sort of performance and visuals. And I think it is that sort of like 2012 to 2017, that block of 5 years when there were some banger games coming out. Sort of the tail end of the no, it's sort of the beginning, of sort of tail end of the the PS3 generation, beginning of the PS4 generation. There's just some great stuff. So Tomb Raider for me is an example. The in the Discord, Chris trumpeted the original Alan Wake, which is another great shout. Alan Wake 2 might not run, but you can play Alan Wake. It's not on Steam. The remaster is not on Steam, but the original is. And the original, I think, on the Steam Deck, you're probably going to get as good an experience on a sort of a smaller screen. Um, and then Sleeping Dogs was mentioned by Baba, which I agree with.
Shout out to
Sleeping
Sleeping
Dogs.
Dogs. I haven't
Shout
thought
out to
about that game
Sleeping
in
Dogs.
so long.
Oh,
My roommate in college, I didn't play through it. That was a game that I remember he was playing through. I think while I was playing Pokemon X, I wanna s no.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah, that probably is right. Um, just a good story, fun game.
Was he much cooler than you in every other aspect, or was it just that one aspect that he had better?
I think it's 50-50.
Okay,
You
alright,
know?
fine.
Yeah.
I love
He's
Sleeping
definitely
Dogs
a
too.
cool guy, you know?
We like cool guys on this. We're all cool guys on this show.
Yeah.
I like Sleeping Dogs as well. I think, like, again, when I played that on PC, I was really impressed with the visuals, and I think that was just, like, the lighting and the sort of the unique setting compared to, like, other GTA-like games. I loved that game. That's another great shout. And Andy Rads, right, also said that, Watch Dogs 1 and 2, Far Cry 3 and 4 all run really well on the deck, and again, that's a great sort of selection of
Mm,
games.
Far
Um,
Cry 3 and 4 are just chef's
and
kiss.
they
Those
probably work really well, and that even that everything from that sort of era, BioShock Infinite, great.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think a good litmus test is any game that is, like, way better with, Xbox. What is it? I'm struggling to remember the name of this recently for some reason. Um,
Play Anywhere?
no, the thing that the feature that, like, upreses the games to 60 FPS and everything on the service side so the developer doesn't have to touch it. It's, smart
Hot
delivery.
Delivery.
Yeah.
Yeah, got
I
there
mean,
at the
we
same
got there.
time.
Uh, it's like any game that you're like, "Oh, wow, yeah, like, this looks like a new game with smart delivery," is, like,
Yeah,
probably a
yeah, yeah.
perfect candidate on Steam Deck to look slightly better than it did on its original hardware or a lot
Yeah.
better than it did on its original hardware, depending on how old it is.
I think PC's good for that. Like, I remember when I played
Yeah.
Dark Souls 2, and I remember, like, when I think about how that game would have looked on the PS3, Xbox 360 or
Mm.
whatever, it would have been like, 720p, it would have been running maybe at 30 FPS, it would have probably looked a bit sort of muddy or low res. Around that 40K, sorry, 4K, locked 60 FPS maximum settings, and I was like, "This game looks great." And I think that there's a lot to be said of, like, older games that were made to run on the older hardware had to fit those constraints, but on PC, you could do whatever the fuck you wanted with it.
Yeah.
And I think that the Steam Deck really shows that because it's on a smaller screen for one, so you can sort of, like, feel the, um, the graphic settings without having to sort of feel you can see it's still 720p, but you're still seeing a massive improvement versus the old consoles.
Yeah, well,
Um
and a lot of the you gotta remember too, right? Like, and it depends on where you're drawing the line, right? If you're talking about last generation games like PS4, Xbox One era titles, those games were all made like their assets are higher than,
mhm,
what they were compressed down to be playable in a good state, right? So it's
yeah,
like those, a lot of those games are in a perfect place for you to run them at 60 FPS on high,
yeah,
and have them run really well. Or, keep it locked at 30 and still high resolution, have a higher resolution than it would have looked on its original,
yeah,
experience, but the same experience you remember and you can, eke out that better battery life and all that good stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those games are just right at home on deck and like I think especially if they're games and I think it kind of can go either way. Like if you're talking about if you're in scale speeder situation and you're like playing these games for the first time, then that's great. Like it's a great way for you to experience them. But I think it's also been really nice for me as, like, a opportunity to go back to games like that, where I'm like, "I would like to replay this," but using the amount of time that I have for dedicated, TV, gaming, right? I kind of want to be trying to prioritize new releases and checking out things I can talk about on the show or whatever. So like it is nice, I think, to be able to do that on deck and be like, oh, like it makes it easier to justify going back to an old favorite and spending some time with it when you can kind of sneak it in on a handheld device, you know?
Yep, I did the same thing with Warhammer 40K Space Marine. We spoke about it earlier this week that I played it before, and it was like, for me, it was like a quite an important game for some reason. Don't know why. It was just like, yeah, I like this a lot. So to then pick that up on Steam Deck and have the exact same experience, but in the palm of my hands, fantastic. Like, love
One
that.
game I would definitely call out, I didn't have this experience with it, because I guess to answer your question, Scale Speeder, I haven't really had this experience where there's a game I skipped and then was like, "Oh, cool, I got to it on deck." Um, I have, definitely seen that happen with games that I really like. Like, I think Persona 5 is a great example of that, where that's
Hmm.
a game I think a lot of people, had a similar experience to me where they play it and they bounce off of it and they come back to it later, or maybe they came back to it when Royal came out and it was a little more streamlined, and then it sticks the second time, you know? And I think part of that is, I mean, at least for me, right, when the original Persona 5 came out, I didn't have a smart TV yet, and my PlayStation was my primary media device. So if I was in the middle of a dungeon and I wanted to, or a palace, and I wanted to stop playing, I needed to get to a save point, and there were
Yeah.
very few and far between in vanilla Persona 5. So like that was something that like kind of got me out of the rhythm of it. And I could see again like this being a game that just like is easier to get into and have like get its hooks in you because it's on Steam Deck. So that's one I would definitely recommend. And a game that when it came to deck, you saw it in the top 3, top 5, still in the top 20 now, I think. But you saw that for months. And I think
Hmm.
it makes sense, right? That game, especially if you only played the original, like, you could have played it on PS3, but probably on PS4. Um, Even if you don't bump up the resolution, like, you can increase the frame rate, like, to 60, and like, even on dock, right? Like, docked, it looks better than it did on the PS4, which is insane. That
Yeah.
game's so
Yeah.
at home there.
I do think that there is. I think people. I do think that people who are like the classic PC master race people have maybe ruined for people to say, "Oh, this game looks better on PC than it does on console." But there are so many examples of like you play something on PC and you're like, "I don't remember it looking like this on console," and that's because it didn't. You know, it did. I remember when I was playing Jedi Fallen Order on PC for the first time in 2020. It was during COVID. Came out the year before, and some other people must have revisited it at the same time. There was an update or something, and I was seeing screenshots on Twitter of people posting their screenshots, and I was like, "Why does it look really bad on there?" And I'm like, "Oh, they're playing it on Xbox, whereas I had it maxed out on PC," and I was like, "Oh, this looks great." It's similar to that, but instead of it being, "Oh, doesn't my isn't my you know £800 £900 PC better than your £300 console?" It's like, "Oh, this I'm getting the experience I was having." On my, at the time, state of the art console on my big TV, I'm getting that in the palm of my hand, and it's better. Somehow I'm getting a better
Yeah.
experience now.
I think to me, it's like that is definitely certainly an advantage of PC, right? But I think so much of that is also like I think PC like games age better on PC,
Mhm,
right? Like I think games are
mhm.
better almost, and I think, come at me in the comments if you want, but I think it's pretty we can agree, right? That like games are better at launch on console for sure.
Yeah, I can see
Almost
that.
almost always.
Mhm.
And that's great, but they're not gonna get better over time, and when you might have to pay for an upgrade when it comes to the next generation, right? Obviously, Xbox's solution to that has been really elegant, and that's been, I think, a pretty analogous experience to PC where I download or pop in my game from my Xbox library, my Xbox 360 library, and it does get up-resed. It does run better and faster, and the load times are non-existent and all that stuff. And that's fantastic, right? Obviously, PlayStation players are not enjoying that. Nintendo Switch players are not enjoying that. But that aside, right? Like if you do get a game like Jedi Survivor, like as you upgrade your PC, like it's always pretty much going to continue to grow and scale and look better and you'll have that better, sharper experience for sure. And I
Yes.
guess the nice thing about Steam Deck is if you're playing games of that era, right? Like as long as you're happy with it being on a smaller display, then I mean, I think like the performance between those consoles and the deck is pretty analogous, you know? So it makes really quick work of them, and it makes it a super comfortable machine to get through your backlog on, especially if you're somebody who's like, traveling a lot, or you share a television, like in a shared family area, or you got roommates or something like that, like definitely. I mean, Steve does a ton of AAA gaming on his Steam Deck, right?
Yeah, and that's not even just through, not even just through through native stuff. That is through streaming as well. I know you played a lot of Xbox
Yeah.
on there
I
before,
guess
and
sorry, not to cut you off, but I was gonna say,
no,
I
no.
guess, like, to share an anecdote Steve would have shared if he was here, like, he did that with Days Gone, right? Like, that game
Mhm.
was years old when it came to Steam, and he played it on deck there for the first time and fell in love with it as, like, a new game. So, yeah, he definitely has had that experience a few times, I would say.
Yeah.
I think he did the same thing with Death Stranding.
Oh, yeah, I also yeah, I think so too, and I think Steam sales help with that because all of a sudden
Yep.
you're picking up a bunch of stuff. I think I picked up all of the Prince of Persia games, for, like, I don't know, a fiver in total, and I got all of the games, and all of a sudden I could go back, and it's the same with, like, Portal. You can get Portal for, like, £2, and if you've not played that before, then you have it runs perfectly well in a handheld thing, and it costs you £2, and it's like, that's an experience that you're having for the first time, and it's a 12-year-old, nearly 13-year-old game at this point, Portal 2. And yeah, it plays better than it ever did and ever has done
To
in your
me,
hand.
that's the even bigger benefit of PC than, like, the performance increases and everything, because it's like, there's a argument, I think, to be made there, right? Of, like, you have to spend more for more performance, and where's that line? And, you could make a PC that's analogous to the current gen consoles and, whatever, whatever, like, that's all great. Steam as a ecosystem, as like a storefront that you can go and buy a 12, 20-year-old game, whatever, right now, and have it be like, yeah, no, and it works. And
Yeah,
it's like that is so
and
powerful.
someone's made the controls for you and set it up for you, and I think that there's a lot of that. um So if you on PlayStation, there was, and especially on the Switch, we have a lot of, like, every time it comes to a direct, it's like, oh, I really want to play this game. I hope they put this game on PlayStation, or like remaster this game because
Yeah.
it's not backwards compatible. You don't have the option of playing that game. Whereas on PC, it's, specifically on Steam, I can pick up my old. If I started to play Skyrim right now, it would be my Skyrim save. Or in Oblivion, it would be my Oblivion save from 10 years ago. That I haven't touched in that time. That'll be exactly where I left off, and it will be there waiting for me.
And like,
Or I could pick up the game now and not have to wait for them to remaster it because I can just play it.
well, and the nice thing too is, like, for a lot of those games, when they do get upgraded, then, like, you get a discount on it, right? Like,
Mhm.
one of the games, like, you kind of alluded to how there's, like, a lot of games that were announced at the Nintendo Direct that happened this week. Thanks for announcing that literally 45 seconds after Nintendo Noise was over, by the way, Nintendo. I thought we agreed we weren't doing that anymore. But Star Wars Battlefront is getting a remastered collection, and it's already deck verified, which is great. It's coming out in March, but you can pre-purchase it right now, and if you already own a copy of the original, you get a 20% discount for that, upgrade, essentially. Um, so it's like, I think you can kind of get the best of both worlds too in a lot of cases, where it's like you have those games and they kind of live with you, and that's great. But like, I remember when they did like the BioShock remastered collection. That was a similar thing where there was a really pretty decent discount. Oh no, that one was actually a free upgrade maybe. Now that I think about it.
Which one's that,
Um
sorry?
for BioShock when they did the
Yeah, I'm
remaster,
pretty
that
sure
was
I
a
got I
free,
got
I think, a free patch.
yeah, because I had BioShock and BioShock 2, and when I decided, "Okay, I'll look at these," I already had the remasters in my library,
Yeah.
which was good.
So
Cool,
yeah,
very
I
cool.
I I think it's like it's obvious that there are some real clear advantages, to just like the Steam ecosystem for games like that like trying to like find those overlooked classics, those modern classics that you missed. I really don't know that there's like a better place to play them, assuming they run on deck, which
Yeah,
more and more they do, right? Like, and I think to your point, a lot of the games in that deck, that like window that you mentioned, that was when we kind of got to HD games being more standardized and it being like the version between the PS4, the Xbox, and the PC is more analogous in terms of like the code and everything. Maybe not in performance, right? But like that's the differentiator, right? So like with that, it makes sense that those games have, aged well because they were kind of made to scale, and
Mhm.
to be able to be kind of upgraded over time, and just like follow the tech. Because like I mean, shit, a lot of games are made, even old games are made with 4K assets, right? So it's
Yeah.
like there are a lot of games that are like super primed to just kind of flip a switch, and it's like, hey, now it's running better, and that's the
You
beauty of smart delivery, right?
you would be shocked at how good you can make a GameCube game looked just by running it on through Dolphin. Metro Prime, you can make look fantastic. You can
Hey,
make
guess what? There's another plug for another tutorial.
Oh, yeah, there we
Check that
go.
one out.
Oh,
We have
boom,
a
this is
tutorial on how to get 60 FPS GameCube games.
this is vertical integration at its finest. On second thought, while I love the plug there, that Power Tools is no longer recommended because it does it automatically.
Oh,
Um
right, I forgot, and you can do that in, the new version of, EmuDeck now.
Yeah, yeah, it just does it all for you now. So
Isn't that
go
wild?
go on the video
I like
anyway, click it, like it, comment, everything, do it anyway. Just don't follow the advice that's in it.
sure. Yeah, that is wild. I had that, experience of, like, updating it on my OLED, the other day and was just like, "Damn, I can't believe all this just, like, happens out of the box now, it's crazy."
Yeah, there's just loads of features.
Like,
Yeah, just
ROM manager is, like, part of it now too, it's like it's all
yeah.
just one window, it's like, "Damn, it's so seamless."
Yep, I need to, I think I might do a reinstall at some point because when I installed it on, helped my boss install it on his ROG Ally, I was like, "This is a different experience."
It's a lot different now.
But there's a lot going on, and that's great. So yeah, I'm probably gonna sort of give that an update,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, that was that. I'm gonna call that a show personally. That was Thanks for the
that's the
questions.
show.
There were 2 great questions that we really were able to go on. Um, there's a lot of links that Pete has to track down now and post so that everyone can see all the stuff that we've promised they can see.
Million tags, it's fine, it'll be great.
It's fine, it's fine. But yeah,
I'll do it
let's
for
call that a
you. I
show.
do it for you guys, for you, Jazzy Jeff.
You all deserve it. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. This has been a good episode. Thank you very much, Pete, for being here, being my man in the chair,
Happy to
listening to
do
me
it.
talk about the things I
Wait, oh
wanted
my
to
god,
talk
hold on.
about.
While you do your outro, I'm
Oh,
gonna give you a little Jazzy Jeff music. Go ahead.
okay. I need to tell you something about me, is that I can't talk while someone else is doing something because it throws me off. So,
Okay, alright, I'll stop.
you're currently getting me explaining why I can't talk to a beat. Um my friends learned this about me once during one of the E3s, and if I started talking about something, they would then start talking at me, and I would have to stop because I couldn't do it. That's just a fun hack. If you want to stop me in my tracks,
I
do
wanna
that.
break your
Anyway,
brain. I'll start beatboxing.
thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, Pete. Why don't you tell the folks where they can go and support us and how they can?
Thank you guys for joining us in another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast. Remember, if you want to show your support for everything we're doing here at Flip Screen Games, you can head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places we are all over the web, including our Discord, where you can keep the conversation rolling between episodes, including all the ways you can write into the Steam docket and get your questions read on the air, just like Scale Speeder and our new friend Jazzy Jeff did today. Make sure you go and write in with your thoughts on this week's episode, or if you've got thoughts for a main topic you'd like to hear us talk about, or if you've got a question like Jazzy Jeff did that you need help with, guess what? We got you covered. Or you can head over to our Discord and join the Steam Deck podcast channel where our very, very helpful community of members may also be able to solve your problem, because that's something that happens plenty of times. Someone comes with a question and I can't even get there to answer it because Team Linux is there and he's like, bam, I solved it for you, baby. So you head over there and you'll find a bunch of really nice, friendly, inviting Steam Deck enthusiasts just like you waiting for you. So I hope you'll come and be a part of it because it's a great time and a great place to hang out. So for the crew, that's going to wrap it up for this week's show. I've been Pete. He's been Max. We'll see you next week.